The water was a perfect, impossible blue. Not the garish, chemical turquoise of a public pool, but a deep, serene sapphire that mirrored the late August sky. It was Liam's sanctuary, the last and most beautiful thing he and his wife, Clara, had built together. Every ripple was a memory, every glint of sun on its surface a ghost of her laughter. He floated on his back, eyes closed, letting the gentle rocking of the water and the drone of a distant lawnmower lull him into a state of fragile peace. This pool, this backyard, was the only place the silence in his sprawling, empty house didn't feel like a scream. A sudden jarring splash from the deep end shattered the tranquility. Liam's eyes snapped open. Two skinny, sun-bleached figures were scrambling out of the water, their laughter sharp and unwelcome. Kyle and Brandon. Brenda's kids from next door. Again! Hey! Liam's voice was rougher than he intended. He swung his legs down, finding the pool's smooth bottom. What have I told you two about coming over without asking? Kyle, the older one at maybe 13, slicked his wet hair back with a smirk. Just cooling off, Mr. Henderson. It's like 1,000 degrees out here. Brandon, a year or two younger, giggled, grabbing a pool noodle that had once been Clara's favorite. The gate is locked for a reason, boys, Liam said, his voice level but firm. He waded towards them, the water sloshing around his waist. The reason is, this is private property. You can't just hop the fence whenever you feel like it. Our mom said you wouldn't mind, Brandon chirped, whacking the water with the noodle. A spray of chlorinated water hit Liam in the face. He didn't flinch, just stared the boy down until the giggling stopped. Well, your mom is mistaken, Liam said, his patience fraying like an old rope. I do mind. I mind very much. Now get your things and go. Use your own front door this time. They grumbled, but something in Liam's tone, a finality that hadn't been there the last 2 times, made them move. They snatched their worn towels from his expensive lounge chairs, leaving a trail of wet footprints across the pristine travertine tiles. Liam watched them slip out the side gate he'd foolishly left unlatched while gardening earlier. He stood there for a long moment, the peace of the afternoon utterly ruined. The pool no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a liability. Dried off, the knot in his stomach tightening with each step he took towards the property line, a line demarcated by a 6-foot cedar fence he'd paid a premium for. He knocked on Brenda's door, the cheerful sunflower yellow paint a stark contrast to his mood. She answered with a phone pressed to her ear, one perfectly manicured finger held up to signal one moment. Brenda was all highlights and athleisure. Where, a woman who treated suburbia like a competitive sport. No, Tinsley, I told him the quarterly projections were unacceptable. Yes, I'll call you back. She pocketed the phone and beamed at Liam, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Liam, to what do I owe the pleasure? Come for a cup. Of my famous cold brew? Brenda, we need to talk about your boys. Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of practiced concern. Oh? Is everything all right? They're good boys, Liam. A little rambunctious, but hearts of gold. They were in my pool again. This is the 3rd time this month. Brenda waved a dismissive hand, the gesture adorned with a clatter of expensive bracelets. Oh, that! Liam, you know how boys are in the summer. They see a beautiful pool like yours and it's like a magnet. You should take it as a compliment. Liam stared at her, baffled by the complete abdication of logic. A compliment? Brenda, they hopped a locked fence. It's trespassing. More than that, it's dangerous. What if one of them slipped, hit their head, drowned? Have you considered the liability I'm exposed to? Oh, don't be so dramatic, she scoffed, leaning against the doorframe. They're practically fish, both of them. On the swim team, you know. Besides, she added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, it's not like you use it much. A big, lonely pool for one person. It seems a shame for it to go to waste. I'm just glad my boys can bring a little life to the place. You should hear them. They talk about Mr. Henderson's awesome pool all the time. The casual, breathtaking entitlement of her words struck Liam like a physical blow. Bring a little life to the place, as if his quiet grief was a problem. For her to solve with her trespassing children. That's not the point, he said, his voice dangerously low. The point is, it's my property. And I am asking you for the last time to tell your sons to stay out of it. If it happens again, I'm calling the police. Brenda's manufactured warmth evaporated instantly, revealing a core of pure steel. Her eyes narrowed. Are you threatening my children, Liam? Because it sounds a lot like you're threatening my children. You, a single man, all alone in that big house, obsessed with where my boys are swimming. It's not a good look. The veiled accusation hung in the air, ugly and venomous. Liam felt a surge of white-hot fury. He wanted to scream at her, to tell her about Clara, about how the pool was the last piece of her he had left, how her son's cannonballs and shouts were desecrating a sacred space. But he knew it would be pointless. To her, his reasons were irrelevant. His property was just an amenity her family was entitled to. Keep your kids off my property, Brenda, he said, his voice cold and flat. He turned and walked away, not trusting himself to say another word. He could feel her glare burning into his back. The next day, he spent $400 on a new, heavier-duty lock for the gate and a series of solar-powered, motion-activated alarms. They were discreet, but their high-pitched shriek was impossible to ignore. For 2 weeks, there was peace. Liam started to relax. He thought, foolishly, that the message had finally been received. Then came the Saturday. He was in his home office, working on a deadline, when the alarm on his side yard went off, a piercing, relentless screech. He bolted from his chair, his heart hammering against his ribs. He ran to the back window that overlooked the pool. And he saw them. Kyle and Brandon hadn't just trespassed. They had brought friends. 4 other boys were with them, all of them, laughing as they took turns trying to pry the alarm off the fence post with a crowbar they'd clearly stolen from a neighbor's unsecured shed. They'd disabled the alarm, but not before it had done its job. Liam didn't shout this time. He didn't run outside. He calmly walked to his desk, picked up his phone, and unlocked it. He opened the app for the new security system he'd installed the week before. 4 high-definition cameras covering every angle of his backyard. He'd told himself it was for insurance purposes. Now he knew it was for war. He hit record. He watched on his screen as the 6 boys, emboldened by their success against the alarm, descended upon his sanctuary. They weren't just swimming. It was a methodical, gleeful campaign of destruction. They yanked the skimmer from its housing and used it as a mock sword, denting the aluminum siding of his shed. They threw his expensive, weighted patio umbrella into the deep end, its canvas tearing as it sank. One of them, a boy Liam didn't recognize, climbed onto the small, decorative waterfall Clara had designed, chipping away at the slate with the crowbar. But it was Kyle, Brenda's golden child, who did the worst. Liam watched, his blood turning to ice, as Kyle located the pool's control panel. He saw the boy's smug face in crystal-clear HD as he began to press buttons at random, laughing as the pump whined in protest and the filter system made a horrible grinding noise. Then, with a final act of malice, he pried open the dispenser for the chlorine tablets and emptied the entire container, dozens of concentrated pucks of corrosive chemicals, directly into the skimmer basket, a move that could permanently destroy the pump and motor. Liam recorded it all. 10 minutes of unadulterated vandalism. He saved the file to his cloud storage, then saved it again to a local hard drive. He didn't call the police. He knew exactly what Brenda's defense would be. Boys will be boys. They didn't mean any harm. You're overreacting. The police would file a report. The boys would get a slap on the wrist, and Brenda would paint him as the neighborhood villain. No, a police report wasn't enough. This wasn't about juvenile delinquency anymore. This was a violation that demanded a response of equal and opposite force. This was about taking away the object of their obsession. He sat there for another hour, long after the boys had grown bored and left, their destructive work complete. He watched the silent, ruined beauty of his backyard on his monitor. The sunken umbrella, the chipped waterfall, the cloudy, over-chemicalized water. He felt a profound sense of loss, but underneath it, something else was hardening. Resolve. Brenda wanted him to share his pool. She felt entitled to it. Her sons treated it not as a privilege, but as their right. Fine. He would cede the point. He would acknowledge that as long as the pool existed, it would be an attractive nuisance, a magnet, as she'd called it. So, he would remove the magnet. The following Monday morning, a crew from a company called Demolition arrived. Their truck was huge, its engine a low rumble that vibrated through the entire cul-de-sac. Liam had already spent the weekend draining the thousands of gallons of water, the sound of the pump a constant mournful hum. Now, the empty shell of his pool looked like a pale, gaping wound in his yard. Brenda appeared at the fence almost immediately, a silk robe clutched at her throat, her face a mask of confusion and outrage. "Liam, what is going on? What is all this noise?" she demanded. "Just." The noise stopped just after 4 o'clock. For 3 days, the symphony of destruction had been the pulse of the neighborhood, the percussive hammering of the jackhammers, the groan of stressed rebar, the deep guttural roar of the excavator. Now, an unnatural quiet fell. Liam stood at his back window, gazing at the gaping brown wound in his yard. The pool was gone. In its place was a rectangular pit of raw earth and shattered concrete waiting to be filled. The air, thick with dust, no longer smelled of chlorine and sunscreen, but of damp soil and pulverized stone. It was a graveyard. His victory felt disturbingly like a funeral. For the rest of the day, Brenda's house was a fortress of silence. The blinds were drawn, the car sat motionless in the driveway. Liam imagined the scene inside. Brenda, a general whose blitzkrieg had been unexpectedly routed, poring over maps of a new battlefield, her fury hardening from a wildfire into a focused, vengeful laser. He knew with a certainty that chilled him that this was not over. He had won the battle of the pool, but she was about to declare a war for the entire neighborhood. The first volley was fired 2 days later. Liam was walking to his mailbox when he saw Carol from across the street watering her petunias. He gave her a small, neighborly wave. Usually, Carol would launch into a 10-minute monologue about her garden, the weather, or her perpetually disappointing son-in-law. Today, she gave him a tight, nervous smile, immediately looked down at her flowers, and turned the spray of her hose away from him as if his gaze might contaminate her. A few houses down, another neighbor who was getting into his car simply pretended not to see him at all. The message was clear. The narrative had been written, and he was the villain. The official declaration of war arrived on Friday in a crisp, cream-colored envelope delivered by certified mail. It was from the Sterling Creek Homeowners Association. Liam's hands were steady as he signed for it, but a cold dread pooled in his stomach. He sat at the polished wood table Clara had insisted on buying, the one they'd planned to host dinner parties at, and slit the envelope open. The complaint was a work of art, a masterpiece of curated omissions and weaponized hyperbole. It was signed by Brenda Miller, chairperson of the Architectural Review Committee. Of course she was. The document listed his violations. Article 4, Section 2, failure to maintain property in a harmonious and aesthetically pleasing condition. The half-demolished state of his backyard, it claimed, constituted a significant and ongoing blight upon the community. Article 6, Section 5, unauthorized major alterations. It alleged he had failed to submit the proper plans and receive written approval from the committee, her committee, before commencing a radical and value-damaging structural removal. But the true poison was in the addendum, under the heading Reported Grievances. It was Brenda's version of events, polished into a terrifyingly plausible fiction. She wrote of Liam's increasingly erratic and hostile behavior. She mentioned his unhealthy fixation on her two young sons. She described the incident not as her children vandalizing his property, but as Liam aggressively confronting and verbally threatening minors over a simple misunderstanding. The removal of the pool, she argued, was not a rational solution, but a disturbing and punitive act of rage, clear evidence of an unstable individual who posed a potential risk to the community's children. She had completely erased her son's culpability. There was no mention of trespassing, no mention of the broken fence, the damaged equipment, the crowbar, and most importantly, no mention of the video. She was gambling that he wouldn't show it, that a reclusive widower would be too cowed to escalate the situation by sharing a video of her angelic children behaving like felons. Liam read it 3 times. The calculated cruelty of it, the sheer audacity of the lies, left him breathless. She wasn't just trying to win, she was trying to annihilate him, to paint him as a pariah, a creep, a monster. She had taken his grief, his desire for peace, and twisted it into a weapon to be used against him. He spent the weekend in a state of simmering rage. The hole in his yard became a metaphor for the hole she was trying to blast in his life. On Monday morning, he saw his chance. Tom, Brenda's husband, was wheeling the recycling bin to the curb. Tom was an accountant, a soft, doughy man who always seemed to be receding, physically and spiritually, in his wife's powerful gravitational pull. Liam walked across his lawn, the HOA letter clutched in his hand. "Tom!" Tom jumped, startled. He looked from Liam to his own front door, as if expecting Brenda to materialize and smite him. "Oh, hey, Liam. Look, I'm sorry about all this. Brenda's just, passionate? Is that the word you're going to use, Tom?" Liam held up the letter. "This isn't passion. This is a character assassination based on a stack of provable lies." Tom's face fell. He wouldn't meet Liam's eyes, focusing instead on the recycling logo on the bin. "She's just trying to protect the boys. A mother's instinct, She thinks you overreacted." "Overreacted?" Liam's voice was sharp. "Your son and his friends caused thousands of dollars in damages and intentionally tried to destroy my pool pump, Tom. I have it on video. Did Brenda mention that part when she was writing this work of fiction?" Tom visibly flinched. She said the boys were roughhousing, that they didn't mean for anything to break." "Then she's lying to you, too," Liam said flatly. "I'm giving you a chance, man to man, to fix this. Go talk to your wife. Tell her to retract this complaint. Tell her to leave me alone. If you don't, I promise you, this is going to get much, much worse for her and for you." For a fleeting second, Liam saw a flicker of something in Tom's eyes, a desire to be decent, to do the right thing. But it was extinguished almost, immediately by a wave of pure fear. "I can't," he whispered, shaking his head. "You don't understand. I can't." He practically fled up his driveway, leaving the recycling bin standing like a blue plastic tombstone between them. The HOA hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday in the community's sterile, beige-carpeted clubhouse. The board consisted of 3 people: Brenda, looking regal and severe in a navy blue power suit; a retired insurance salesman named George, who clearly wanted to be anywhere else; and a woman named Patricia, whose expression of intense concentration suggested she was taking this all very, very seriously. Liam had prepared a simple, factual statement. Brenda, he quickly realized, had prepared a one-act play. She spoke first. Her voice trembled with manufactured emotion as she painted a picture of an idyllic suburban summer shattered by the unpredictable man next door. She spoke of her son's fear, of sleepless nights, of a community living in the shadow of Liam's disproportionate rage. She produced photographs of Liam's backyard, the pit of dirt and rubble looking like a blast crater in the otherwise manicured neighborhood. "This is not about a pool," she concluded, her voice thick with fake tears, a hand pressed to her chest. "It's about safety. It's about peace of mind. It's about protecting our families from instability." Then it was Liam's turn. He stood and calmly laid out the timeline of events. The repeated trespassing, the verbal warnings, the ignored requests, the escalation. He kept his voice, even, his language precise. He mentioned the vandalism. "Mr. Henderson," Patricia interrupted, peering at him over her bifocals. "Brenda's report makes no mention of any vandalism. It says you threatened her children." "Her report is false," Liam stated. Brenda gasped, a perfect theatrical sound of outrage. "How dare you call me a liar? George, Patricia, this is what I'm talking about, this aggression." George shifted uncomfortably. "Well, Mr. Henderson, it's a classic he said, she said situation, isn't it? All we have are these photos of your yard, and frankly, son, it's a mess. Brenda's right, it is a blight." Liam felt a surge of frustration. They didn't want the truth. They wanted the path of least resistance. A hysterical mother was a potential lawsuit. A quiet widower was just a problem to be tidied up. He had the video on his phone, right there, in his pocket. The temptation to play it, to detonate her lies right in front of them, was immense. But he held back. It felt wrong, showing this to them. It wasn't a matter for a neighborhood committee. It was evidence, and evidence was for a different kind of fight. "I have a landscaping crew scheduled to begin work as soon as the fill dirt is delivered," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "The situation is temporary. The harassment from my neighbor, however, seems to be ongoing." The board deliberated for less than 5 minutes. Their verdict was as predictable as it was infuriating. Liam was found in violation of Article 4 and vers. He was given a formal warning, fined $500, and given 30 days to submit a landscaping plan and remediate the blighted property. The meeting was adjourned. As Liam gathered his notes, Brenda walked past him. She didn't look at him, but she leaned in close enough for him to hear her whisper, her voice a low, triumphant hiss. "You should have just shared the pool, Liam." He watched her walk out, her head held high, the victor leaving the field. He felt a moment of pure, unadulterated defeat. She had outplayed him. She had used the rules of their small, suburban world to perfection, and he had lost. The fine, the warning, they were nothing. It was the principle. The injustice of it was a physical weight. He walked out of the clubhouse into the setting sun. The anger was still there, but the heat of it was gone, replaced by an Arctic. Arthur Davies's office was a testament to expensive, minimalist tranquility. Perched on the 12th floor of a downtown high-rise, it offered a panoramic view of the city, a world away from the manicured pettiness of Sterling Creek. The man himself was like his office, sleek, precise, and devoid of clutter. He wore a perfectly tailored gray suit and possessed a stillness that Liam found both unnerving and immensely reassuring. He didn't offer condolences or platitudes. He shook Liam's hand, gestured to a leather chair, and said, "Let's see what you have." Liam slid his tablet across the vast expanse of a mahogany desk. Davies turned it around, tapped the screen, and for the next 10 minutes, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the building's climate control. Liam watched the lawyer's face, searching for a reaction, but Davies's expression remained neutral, his eyes focused, analytical. He watched the whole video, then scrolled back and rewatched the part where Kyle gleefully dumped the chlorine tablets into the skimmer. He paused the video on a perfect high-definition close-up of the boy's sneering face. He looked up at Liam. "Well," he said, his voice as dry as autumn leaves, "that's not kids being kids. That is malicious destruction of property, with clear, demonstrable intent. Section 609, 595 of the State Criminal Code, if you were curious. We can work with this. A weight Liam hadn't even realized he was carrying lifted from his shoulders. It was the validation, the professional, unequivocal confirmation that he was not the one who was overreacting. He wasn't the crazy one. Your neighbor, Mrs. Miller, Davies continued, steepling his fingers. She has made two critical mistakes. First, she put her libelous accusations against you in writing in that HOA complaint. That is a gift. Second, she has underestimated you. She thinks you're a grieving recluse who will eventually fold under pressure. We are going to disabuse her of that notion immediately. The strategy Davies laid out was methodical and brutal. First, Liam was to cease all and any communication with the Miller family. No more attempts to reason with Tom. No more words exchanged over the fence with Brenda. He was to become a ghost. Second, he was to purchase a small bound notebook and begin a log. Every instance of harassment, no matter how minor, was to be recorded with the date, time, and a factual description. Plausible deniability is a bully's best friend, Davies explained. A detailed contemporaneous log is its worst enemy. Finally, Davies would draft two letters. The first, to the HOA board, would formally dispute their findings and inform them that their decision was predicated on a fraudulent and libelous complaint and put them on notice that any further punitive action against his client would be met with legal action against the board members personally. The second letter, the main event, was for Brenda. We will send it to her and her husband via courier, requiring a signature, Davies said, a glint in his eye. It will be a formal cease and desist letter. It will outline the events of the vandalism in detail. It will state that we have irrefutable video evidence. It will demand they instruct their children to never set foot on your property again, and it will inform them that a full accounting of all damages is being prepared, for which they will be held financially responsible. Liam walked out of the office an hour later, the $5,000 retainer feeling like the best money he'd ever spent. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was a plaintiff. Brenda received her letter on a Tuesday afternoon. Liam was in his office when he saw the courier van pull up. He watched as Brenda signed for the envelope, a look of annoyance on her face, likely assuming it was a delivery she hadn't ordered. He saw her rip it open, her posture confident, almost arrogant. He watched that confidence crumble as she read. She stood frozen on her porch for a full minute, the papers trembling in her hand. Then she stormed inside, slamming the door so hard, the decorative wreath fell off its hook. The counterattack began that night. At 10:15 p.m., a basketball slammed against Liam's bedroom window, loud enough to make him jolt upright in bed. By the time he got to the window, the yard was empty. He took a deep breath, walked to his desk, and opened the new black notebook. August 27th, 10:15 p.m., loud impact on bedroom window, consistent with a basketball. No visible damage. The next morning. The new sod he'd had laid in the vast pit of his former pool was drenched, floating in a swamp of muddy water. Brenda's sprinkler system, which normally sprayed her own lawn, had been re-aimed during the night to point directly at his property. He took pictures with his phone, then opened the log. August 28th, 7 a.m. Discovered new landscaping intentionally flooded by neighbors' misdirected sprinkler heads. The petty harassment continued for a week. Loud music from their patio late at night. Their dog, a yapping terrier, was suddenly allowed to do its business right at the edge of his property line, which they conveniently forgot to clean up. Kyle and Brandon would ride their bikes past his house, staring at his windows with unnerving intensity. Liam ignored it all. He didn't shout, didn't complain, didn't react. He just observed, photographed, and recorded everything in his neat, dispassionate logbook. He was building a case, brick by methodical brick. The escalation he knew was coming arrived on a Saturday. He was cleaning out his garage when two police cars pulled into his driveway. Two officers, a man and a woman, approached. Him, their expressions carefully neutral but their hands close to their belts. "Sir, are you Liam Henderson?" the male officer asked. "I am," Liam said calmly. "We received a call, sir. A request for a welfare check. A neighbor expressed concern that you seemed distraught, unstable even. Said they heard yelling from the house. It was Brenda's. Masterstroke. A public, humiliating attempt to codify her narrative, to have him officially on record with the police as the neighborhood nutcase." But Liam was ready. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind. He didn't get angry or defensive. He gave the officers a weary, patient smile. "Officers, I can assure you I'm perfectly fine," he said. "I'm also not surprised by this call. My neighbor, Brenda Miller, has been engaged in a pattern of harassment against me for several weeks, which I have been documenting at the instruction of my attorney." He pulled his wallet out slowly and handed them one of Arthur Davies's business cards. "This is retaliation for a legal notice she received from him. There has been no yelling. I live alone, and as you can see, I was just cleaning my garage." The officers exchanged a look. This was not the unhinged man they had been led to expect. They saw a calm, well-spoken man, a clean garage, and a lawyer's business card. They had walked into a classic, messy neighbor dispute. "Would you mind if we just took a quick look inside the house, sir?" the female officer asked, her tone softening slightly. "Just to check all the boxes." "Not at all. Please," Liam said, leading them inside. They walked through the spotless, silent house. They saw the neat stacks of books, the tidy kitchen, the profound, peaceful quiet. At the end of their brief tour, the male officer nodded, his face apologetic. "Sorry to have bothered you, Mr. Henderson. It appears the call was unfounded." "I understand completely, officer. You're just doing your job," Liam said. "For your report, please note that this is the latest in a series of incidents I believe constitute harassment. I would appreciate it if that were on the record." The officer nodded. "Will do, sir." Liam watched them leave. As they pulled out of his driveway, he saw Brenda's face appear in her living room window, her expression of righteous concern quickly dissolving into confusion and fury. Her bomb had been a dud. Worse, he'd turned it into a piece of evidence against her. He opened his logbook. September 6th, 11:30 a.m. Subjected to a fraudulent police welfare check, clearly initiated by B. Miller as part of ongoing harassment campaign. Officers confirmed the call was unfounded. Case number. That afternoon, he emailed Davies an update. The reply was swift. "Excellent work. She's overplayed her hand. The false police report is a very serious misstep. It's time to send the bill." For the next 2 days, Liam was on the phone. He called the pool company and got a formal quote for the full replacement cost of a pump and filter system identical to the one Kyle had tried to destroy. He got a quote for the cost of repairing the chipped slate on the waterfall. He added the cost of the designer patio umbrella. Then he gathered the invoices from the demolition crew and the landscapers, the total cost to remove the pool, haul away the debris, bring in 50 tons of fill dirt, and lay the new sod. He compiled it all into a single, itemized spreadsheet. The numbers stacked up, each one a monument to Brenda's arrogance. He emailed the final tally to Davies. The grand total was $28,450. On Thursday afternoon, a professional process server, a grim-faced man in a cheap suit, walked up Brenda's driveway. Tom answered the door, a weak, welcoming smile on his face that died the moment the server said his name. "Thomas Miller, you've been served." The server handed him the thick envelope and left. Liam watched from his window as Tom stared at the official-looking documents, his face turning the color of ash. Brenda must have heard the commotion because she appeared, behind him, snatching the papers from his hand. Liam couldn't hear what she was saying, but he could see her face. He saw the flicker of annoyance, then the sharp intake of breath, the widening of her eyes as she scanned the first page. A formal notice of intent to file a civil lawsuit for damages. He saw her full The slam of the front door was the opening salvo. The silence that followed was heavy, volatile, the kind of quiet that precedes a lightning strike. Tom Miller stood in the center of their pristine, open-concept living room, the legal documents, a dead weight in his hand. His face, usually a placid landscape of mild contentment, was a pale, crumpled mask of terror. As an accountant, he understood numbers. The number on the invoice, $28,450, was not an abstraction. It was their 5-year savings plan. It was the down payment for a rental property they'd been considering. It was, in short, a financial catastrophe. Brenda paced in front of the fireplace, her arms crossed so tightly it looked like she was trying to hold herself together. "It's a bluff," she hissed, her voice a ragged whisper. "A scare tactic. He's a lonely little man, trying to intimidate us. He wouldn't dare sue. The court fees alone." "He's already paid a $5,000 retainer, Brenda." Tom's voice was uncharacteristically sharp, cutting through her tirade. He waved the papers at her. "This isn't a game. This isn't the HOA. This is a notice of intent to sue from a litigator in the biggest law firm in the city. They don't bluff." "I was protecting our sons!" she shrieked, whirling to face him. "From him! A man who was obsessed with them!" "He was obsessed with them trespassing," Tom yelled back, taking a step toward her. It was the first time in their 15 years of marriage he had ever raised his voice to her. He asked us, politely, 3 times, to keep them out of his yard. And what did you do? You told them he wouldn't mind. You encouraged them. And when they destroyed his property, you lied about it. You lied to the HOA, you lied to the neighbors, and you lied to me. I was handling it. You handled it. Into a $28,000 lawsuit, he roared, throwing the documents onto the polished marble countertop. He has a video, Brenda, a video of our sons committing a felony, because you were too damn proud and arrogant to just apologize and tell your kids to behave. The ugly truth of his words hung between them. Brenda stared at him, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock at his outburst and the dawning, horrifying realization that she had lost control. The chessboard she had so masterfully dominated, the neighborhood, the HOA, her own husband, had been flipped over. She had no moves left. Her next move was born of desperation. She tried to rally her troops. The next morning she went on a neighborhood offensive, armed with a story of victimhood so dramatic it bordered on the absurd. She spoke of the unhinged widower and his predatory lawsuit, framing it as an attack on all the families in Sterling Creek. "Today it's my boys," she'd say, her voice trembling to anyone who would listen. "But tomorrow, it could be your children he targets." But the magic was gone. Her narrative, once so effective, now had a price tag. And that price tag was $28,450. The number traveled through the neighborhood like a shockwave. It recontextualized everything. Liam wasn't just a crank anymore. He was a man who had been pushed to a 5-figure breaking point. The whispers started to change. What did her kids actually do to cause that much damage? "I heard they broke his pool pump. Brenda always let those boys run wild." The tide turned publicly at the community mailboxes. Brenda was in the middle of a tirade when Carol from across the street, the woman who had once shunned Liam, interrupted her. "Goodness, Brenda," Carol said, her expression one of genuine, morbid curiosity. $28,000? What on earth did your boys do to that man's yard? The question, simple and direct, hung in the air like an indictment. Brenda faltered, her prepackaged lines about boys being boys suddenly sounding flimsy and absurd. For the first time, the neighbors weren't looking at her with sympathy. They were looking at her with judgment. She had brought a firestorm into their peaceful cul-de-sac, and they were beginning to back away lest they get burned. The meeting with their own lawyer was the final, brutal dose of reality. He was a small, tired man who specialized in wills and estates, not litigation. He read through the notice from Davies's firm, his face growing paler with every page. He looked at Tom, then at Brenda. "Do they really have a video?" he asked. "It's inadmissible," Brenda snapped. "He filmed my children without my permission." The lawyer gave a weary sigh. "Ma'am, your children were trespassing on his private property and committing a crime. It's absolutely admissible. And given the itemized list of damages and the written evidence of your libelous claims to the HOA, I'd say you don't have a leg to stand on. You need to settle, immediately, before they file and this becomes public record." While the Miller household was imploding, Liam's life was quietly rebuilding. The landscapers had finished their work. Where the concrete wound had been, there was now a lush, rolling carpet of emerald green sod. A winding path of flagstones led to a beautiful stone fire pit surrounded by comfortable chairs. Young maple trees and flowering bushes dotted the landscape. He was reclaiming the space, not as a shrine to a memory, but as a sanctuary for his future. The physical act of creation, of bringing life back to the scarred earth, was more healing than he could have ever imagined. He was filling the hole in his yard, and in doing so, filling a hole in himself. 2 weeks after the papers were served, Arthur Davies called. "They've lawyered up," he said, "and they've blinked. Their attorney is requesting a formal mediation. They want to avoid court." "What does that mean?" Liam asked. "It means we have them on the ropes," Davies replied. "We agree to the mediation. We go in, we state our terms, and we don't budge. Let's finish this." The mediation was held in a sterile conference room halfway between their neighborhood and downtown. The air in the room was thick with a toxic brew of resentment, fear, and animosity. Liam and Davies sat on one side of a long, polished table. Across from them sat Brenda, Tom, and their beleaguered-looking lawyer. A professional mediator, a calm, gray-haired woman, sat at the head. Brenda, against her lawyer's frantic, whispered advice, tried to take control from the start. "I just want to say," she began, her voice quivering with performative emotion, "that this has been a horrific ordeal for my family. My boys are traumatized." "We are not here to discuss feelings," Davies cut in, his voice cold and sharp as shattering glass. "We are here to discuss restitution for the damages your client's children caused. Let's not waste everyone's time. Before we discuss numbers, I think it's important for everyone to be on the same page regarding the facts." Davies calmly opened his laptop and connected it to the large monitor on the wall. "This is Exhibit A in our potential civil filing." He pressed play. The 10 minutes of silent, high-definition footage filled the room. No one spoke. The only sounds were the quiet hum of the monitor and Brenda's ragged breathing. Liam didn't watch the screen. He watched Tom, who sank into his chair and covered his face with his hands, unable to look. And he watched Brenda, who was forced to see her son's malicious grin, his deliberate, destructive actions, magnified and undeniable. There was no room for interpretation, no space for her narrative. There was only the cold, damning truth. When the video ended, the screen went black, but the images hung in the air. Davies let the silence stretch for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he slid a single sheet of paper across the table towards the opposing lawyer. "Here is our settlement offer," he said, his voice calm and deliberate. "It is comprehensive, and it is non-negotiable." Tom's lawyer read it first, his expression grim. He slid it to Tom, who read it and let out a long, shuddering sigh that sounded almost like relief. Finally, it came to Brenda. She snatched the paper, her eyes blazing. She read the first point. Financial restitution in the amount of $20,000 payable over 24 months. Her expression tightened, but it was the next 2 points that made the color drain from her face. Point 2. Formal resignation, effective immediately, from all positions within the Sterling Creek Homeowners Association, including the architectural. Review Committee. Point 3. A formal written letter of apology to be drafted by our firm, admitting to the falsity of the claims made in the HOA complaint and to the campaign of harassment, including the fraudulent police report. This letter is to be signed by both Brenda and Thomas Miller and delivered not only to Mr. Henderson, but also to the HOA Board of Directors. Brenda stared at the paper, her knuckles white. The money was a blow, but this was an execution. He wasn't just asking for her money. He was demanding she dismantle her entire social standing. He wanted her to surrender her power, her influence, her reputation. He wanted her to confess, in writing, that she was a liar. She looked up, her eyes locking on Liam's. The fury in them was incandescent, but beneath it, there was the cold, hard terror of a queen who had just been checkmated. She had two choices: a public, brutal trial that would ruin them financially and expose her sons as vandals, or the quiet, complete humiliation of unconditional surrender. The single sheet of paper lay on the polished table like a declaration of unconditional surrender. In the sterile, silent conference room, Brenda's ragged breathing was the only sound. Her face was a canvas of warring emotions: disbelief, incandescent, rage, and the cold, creeping dread of total defeat. Her eyes, burning with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful, were locked on Liam. "No," she finally whispered, the words small but packed with venom. "Absolutely not. I will not sign that. I will not be humiliated." Her lawyer slumped in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Brenda, please. We'll go to court," she snarled, her gaze still fixed on Liam. "We will drag this out for years. I will spend every last cent we have to prove what a monster you are." It was Tom who broke the spell. He had been silent for the entire meeting, a ghost at his own execution. Now he sat up straight. The doughy softness was gone from his face, replaced by the hard, brittle look of a man who had finally been broken and reforged into something new. He didn't look at Brenda. He looked at their lawyer. "We accept the terms," he said. His voice was quiet, devoid of emotion, but carried the finality of a judge's gavel. Brenda's head snapped towards him, her eyes wide with shock and betrayal. "What did you say?" "I said we accept the terms," Tom repeated, finally meeting her gaze. There was no fear in his eyes, only a vast, desolate exhaustion. "It's over, Brenda. You don't get to burn our lives down to protect your pride. You don't get to sacrifice our children's future on that altar. I'm done." He turned back to their lawyer. "Draw up the acceptance. We'll sign it today." The fight went out of Brenda in an instant. It was as if her strings had been cut. Her body, which had been rigid with defiance, seemed to collapse in on itself. The tyrant had been overthrown, not by the enemy at the gate, but by a rebellion from within her own kingdom. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She just stared at her husband, the stranger sitting across from her, and for the first time, Liam saw her for what she truly was: a bully who had just lost her power. And without her power, she was nothing. The weeks that followed were a systematic dismantling of the Miller dynasty. The first wire transfer for $5,000 appeared in Liam's account, the first of 4 installments. It felt less like money and more like a trophy. A week later, an email was circulated to the entire Sterling Creek community from the HOA board. It was a brief, jargon-filled announcement about restructuring, but the key sentence was impossible to miss. "We'd like to thank Brenda Miller for her years of service as she steps down from her positions on the board and the Architectural Review Committee, effective immediately." The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Her reign was officially over. The final piece, the instrument of her ultimate humiliation, arrived by courier on a cool September morning. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope, identical to the one that had started this war. Liam took it out to his new backyard. The garden was thriving. The young maples were showing the first hints of autumn color, and the air smelled of rich soil and blooming chrysanthemums. He sat in a chair by the silent fire pit and slid the single sheet of paper out of the envelope. It was written in the dry, precise language of a legal document, drafted by Davies himself, but the words were a confession. To Mr. Liam Henderson and the Sterling Creek HOA Board of Directors. This letter serves as a formal and sincere apology for our actions over the past several months. We fully retract all previous statements, both written and verbal, made to the HOA and to our neighbors regarding Mr. Henderson's character and behavior. We acknowledge the falsity of the claims made in our formal complaint of August 25th. We take full responsibility for the actions of our sons, Kyle and Brandon Miller, who on August 23rd did knowingly trespass and cause significant material and financial damage to Mr. Henderson's private property. Furthermore, we deeply regret and apologize for the subsequent campaign of harassment, which included a fraudulent and unfounded report made to the local police department. Our behavior was unacceptable and caused Mr. Henderson undue distress. We hope that this apology will serve to finally resolve the matter. Sincerely, Thomas Miller, Brenda Miller. The two signatures were at the bottom. Tom's was neat and resigned. Brenda's was a jagged, angry gash of ink, the signature of a person signing their own death warrant. Liam read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it on the table beside him. He didn't feel a surge of triumph or a desire to gloat. He felt a profound, quiet, and deeply satisfying sense of peace. It was the period at the end of a long and terrible sentence. It was the sound of silence after a war. It was vindication. Life in the cul-de-sac found a new, quieter rhythm. The Miller house became a subdued place. The curtains were often drawn. The loud, boisterous patio parties ceased. Tom became the public face of the family, offering tight, polite nods to his neighbors, his face etched with a permanent weariness. He and Brenda were rarely seen together. Brenda herself became a ghost. Liam would occasionally catch a glimpse of her through a window or getting into her car, but she moved with a hurried, furtive energy, her eyes always downcast. The queen of the neighborhood was now a recluse, stripped of her authority and her audience. The most dramatic change was in her sons. Their free-range reign of terror was over. Liam would see them on weekends, not at the head of a pack of wild boys, but doing yard work under Tom's watchful eye. They mowed the lawn, they raked leaves, they washed the cars. Their faces were sullen and resentful, but the arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by the grim reality of consequence. Their summer of entitlement had ended with them paying, quite literally, for their crimes. One crisp Saturday afternoon in October, Liam lit the first fire in his new fire pit. He'd invited a few neighbors over, Carol from across the street and another couple from down the block. They sat in the comfortable chairs, drinking cider, the warmth of the flames pushing back the autumn chill. It was easy, comfortable. They talked about football and property taxes and Carol's disappointing son-in-law. No one mentioned the Millers. No one mentioned the pool. From his chair, Liam had a clear view of the fence line, the barrier that had once been a battlefront. He saw a light flick on in the Millers' kitchen, a brief, silent silhouette in the window, and then it was gone. They were just people in a house, a problem that had been solved. They held no more power over him. Carol raised her mug. "You know, Liam," she said, a warm smile on her face, "this garden is just beautiful. So much more peaceful than that pool ever was." Liam looked at the dancing flames, at the faces of his new friends, at the thriving garden he had built from a place of destruction. The irony was not lost on him. He had fought a war to protect a memory, a sanctuary he had built with his late wife. He had lost that battle, and the pool was gone forever. But in destroying it, in fighting for his right to be left alone, he had been forced out of the lonely fortress of his grief and back into the world. He had built something new, not on the foundation of his past, but for his future. He smiled, a genuine, easy smile. The crushing silence he used to feel in his yard was gone. It had been replaced by the crackle of a fire, the sound of friendly laughter, and the quiet, comforting presence of a hard-won peace.